Good morning, all. Hope you're doing well. For those who don't know who I am, I'm Jeffrey Rickman. I don't know why you'd be watching this if you don't know who I am, but if somebody turns you on to this later, this is who I am. I'm a Global Methodist Elder in northeastern Oklahoma, and I'm happy to be doing this series where I'm going through petitions of the Convening General Conference. So I'm just now turning on the live stream to locals. Hey, locals, friends. And I'm going to reload the chat on Restream. For some reason, I have to do that as soon as I begin so that I can see comments from Facebook and YouTube. If you haven't watched my previous live streams, I'm going through the different petitions for the convening conference to the Global Methodist Church. It's going to be in less than a month. It's going to be, right now we're at the very end of August, and it's going to be starting in just a couple weeks in September. So they're going to be meeting in San Jose, establishing this new denomination in a much more formal sense than it has been. And it's exciting. So we're going through the materials that they're going to go through. I don't think there's any way we can make it through all the material, but I was able to sit down with Nate Fugate a couple days ago and record him going through many of his amendments, so I should hopefully be publishing that later today. I don't know when I'm going to find time because I'm also interviewing Jerry Kula about developments in Liberia as he and many try to get clear of the United Methodist Church, even though Bishop Quire is not letting them. So I'm going to be doing that interview. I've got an interview that I completed yesterday with Wendy Moeller-Sieb that I still need to publish. I don't know when that's going to happen. And then I need to clip up a lot of what I've already covered. I'm going to have each petition individually published, hopefully for the delegates. I originally started this thinking it wouldn't be very helpful to delegates, but then I've heard from a number of delegates who've been watching and really appreciated me going through the material. So if that's you, I hope this is a blessing to you. I think it's good just to reflect on all of these things theologically and practically. In the thumbnail today, you might have noticed that I said I'm going to have David Watson on with me, and that's not a lie. He's not with me right now, but he is going to be with me. He couldn't move quite this early, so I've sent him a Zoom link. He's gonna sign on here in a little bit, and then we'll go through the materials together. We're still in a section where the TLC has presented many amendments for establishing a new Episcopal order, and he's on the TLC, and he's on the Episcopacy Legislative Committee, which is the committee that reviews all of the legislation pertaining to episcopacy before the convening conference meets and during the convening conference. So he's in a unique position to speak to all of these, and so I appreciate him being willing to appear before us, be a consult. So want to say good morning to George and Jen and Evie and Tim and Matt. And Matt is also going to be a consult for me. He sits on the Finance Legislative Committee, and that means he's reviewed one of my petitions that I submitted, but also that he's done a lot of really good legwork on understanding a lot of the financial implications of what we're talking about. So when we get to the finance section, I'll be calling on him to come help me and you understand these things. I think we're up and going. We got 15 people with us on Facebook and YouTube. Y'all feel free to sign in and let me know who you are and how you're doing. We got Stephen on YouTube, and we're going to be starting off with Petition 33 today, but before that, we need to pray. So let's do that. We've got our daily prayer guide for the General Conference, which of course you can download at sotheworldwillknow.org. Before I go through that, I need to let everybody know. Yesterday I heard from Keith Boyette, and he and the denominational leadership are denying my request to cover the convening conference in the way that I did the United Methodist General Conference. For those of you who may or may not remember, I was able to restream what they live streamed and then add commentary over it so that an audience understood what was happening in the proceedings. And I sent a proposal to the GMC leadership a couple months ago, and I heard back yesterday, and they don't want me to cover the convening conference that way. So I'm going to be looking at options for how it is that I can cover developments there without breaking copyright law, because they were quite clear that they would be defending the live stream with copyright law against me and anyone else who would use the content in ways that they don't like. So it's an unfortunate development, in my opinion. Of course, it's their prerogative to make such a decision. I'm not going to say that they're out of line and they have no right to make such a decision. But I am going to say I think it's an unfortunate decision. I think this is a missed opportunity to show that the GMC is going to be different and transparent and not threatened by people who cover them in ways that are outside of their aegis. So anyway, I know that's disappointing to a number of people. I've had a number of people say, hey, I hope you can give similar coverage, and it looks like I'm not going to be able to. So anyway, I'm a little bit disappointed about that, but I still think that there are probably some good ways in which I can help people understand what's going on at the convening conference when it's going on. So if y'all want to privately write me about that, I'm at plainspokenpod@gmail.com. And yeah, that's all there is to say about that. So let's pray. Today is August 30th, day 24 of 40 days of prayer. Let us pray. Gracious God, we know that you are the potter and we are the clay. Mold your church and make us into the likeness of Jesus Christ. Show us how to offer your grace and mercy in ways that transform the world. Give John Lomperis, the Global Methodist Church's General Conference business manager, the mantle of a godly potter. Amen. That's a really good prayer. I've noticed just yesterday on Friends of the GMC Facebook page, there's a gentleman, I can't think of his name right now, but he's been generating a meme for each prayer, and they're really quite tasteful. It's the exact same text, and then if it's for an individual person, he puts a picture of the person on there. So we prayed for Keith Boyette yesterday, praying for John Lomperis today, and anyway, he's just doing this on his own. It's not under the umbrella of the GMC, and I just love being a part of a body where people, we have official paid positions that are responsible for doing stuff like that, but then whenever they're not able to get around to it because they're very busy, we have other people that just fill the gap, and so I just think that's awesome. So I'm going to talk to him and see if I can't start sharing these prayers on the Plain Spoken Facebook page, because I just think it's good to get people praying, and a lot of people, it just takes a meme showing up on their feed, and they go, yeah, oh yes, I need to pray this. It's a helpful thing to do. So I'm going to look and see if there are any other comments before. Good morning, Bill. And that's the only other good morning I've got. There are a lot of people just along for the ride silently. So we're going to go to our petitions now. And then when David joins, I'm just going to bring him right in and I'll let him know what we missed out on. If you guys, if any of you who were with me yesterday can remember any of there were several questions that I kind of came up with, and I remember them being around the Committee on Episcopacy. But there were several things that were just not clear about how it works. So if y'all could go ahead and type out some of those questions from yesterday, then I can steal them from you. You can put them in the comments, and then I can read them. And then at 8 o'clock, no, at 8:15 or 8:30, we're going to transition over to locals. So local supporters are going to be able to ask questions directly of David, and he will answer them for us. This is going to be anything from the perspective of the TLC and the Episcopacy Legislative Committee. If you have questions for someone sitting on that committee, then I will bring them to David, and he will answer them directly. And I want to thank whoever it was. I haven't seen the name yet, but somebody did join my local subscriber base yesterday. So we're up to 59 people, and that's great. I love having a group of people for whom this is something worthy of support. So if you haven't already, go over to plainspoken.locals.com and sign up and become a supporter so that you can comment and be in dialogue with David and me. Good morning, Nigeria UM Partnership. This would be United Methodist. So I'm interested in who you are and if if you're happily staying UMC and while you're interested in the GMC. So hopefully you're praying blessing upon us. All right, let's look at Petition 33 is where we're at today. It's a 3-page petition. It's put out by the TLC. The rationale is that it creates the office of a conference superintendent, replacing existing presidents pro tempore to provide spiritual and temporal leadership for each annual conference. So I was sent, I don't know if I should say who sent it to me, a graphic yesterday showing some of the difference between the two plans. So I'm going to, I downloaded that. Well, I didn't download it on this computer. So I'm going to download it real quick, and I'm going to show it to you. Episcopal plans. I found this very helpful. Please excuse me for just 1 minute. All right, does it go to downloads or it does not? It goes to desktop. All right, I'm pulling it up now, bringing it over here. It's kind of overwhelming. I don't know why you did this many categories, but it makes the point. It gets the point across. All right, so now I'm going to go back here and hit this button. All right, so this is the TLC Episcopal Plan. And so there's going to be Bishop Jones, Bishop Webb, Bishop Johanna. Those are the active bishops right now. I think Johanna is going to get replaced by a Nigerian bishop. I think he's immediately stepping down. Then you have a bishop, several bishops to be elected, and under them is the conference superintendent, which is who we're about to talk about, the annual conference report to the bishop. These two entities report, the top two entities, and then the local church reports to the annual conference and the conference superintendent. And you'll see one bishop is responsible for many annual conferences and conference superintendents on down. So 4 to 6 is what we've been told. So I'm going to skip over this, but we'll keep it open in case we need it. So in the Florida Episcopal plan, we're going to have 3 active bishops. I think Johanna is going to get replaced. I could be wrong. But then the bishops are over, well, okay, so this would be the case for the next 2 years. This is what would be the case. They would be over a conference superintendent and an annual conference. So it'd be very similar, except there would be over many more conferences. But after 2026, then it would shift to this model. Bishop is over the annual conference, which is then over the local church. So for 2 years in this flux period, we would only have 3 active bishops, or maybe even 2. And then at 2026, it would shift. So this, with the Florida Episcopal plan, I don't think this legislation from the TLC about conference superintendents would apply. So this is only for the TLC plan. I haven't yet read the Florida plan to learn the difference between conference superintendents in that plan and in the TLC plan. So let's go back to the petitions. All right, this is petition 33. And then here is the position as they design it. And in case it's not clear, in the United Methodist Church, we had a bishop for each annual conference, very much like what we just saw in the Florida plan at the bottom. Now, that's not to say the Florida plan is exactly like the United Methodist plan. It's just in that way similar to it. So here, the conference superintendents is, for all intents and purposes, a bishop of an annual conference. They are the primary temporal leadership head of the annual conference. Paragraph 507. Conference superintendents. Conference superintendents are elders who are appointed by the bishop after consultation with the annual conference connectional council, that's the primary governing board that operates throughout the year, or equivalent, and affirmation by the annual conference to provide spiritual and temporal leadership to each annual conference. So they're appointed by the bishop after consultation with the connectional council. So they are not elected by the annual conference. They're appointed by the bishop, who has consulted not with the annual conference, but with the connectional council, to provide spiritual and temporal leadership to each annual conference. So even though they in the public discourse have said conference superintendents are going to be primarily temporal and bishops going to be primarily spiritual. What I've noticed in the TLC plans is the language for both positions has said both temporal and spiritual. So that's interesting to me. Back to the petition. By vote of the annual conferences involved, 2 or more conferences may agree to be led by a single conference superintendent. Okay, so there's versatility in the Florida plan, which says that one bishop can be over multiple conferences. There's similar flexibility in the TLC plan where one conference superintendent can be over multiple conferences. Conference superintendents serve an initial term of 6 years and may be extended annually for up to 12 total years of service. So for some reason, this isn't covering the 2-year intertestamental period, I don't know, of from now to 2026 when we would start this. But I think the plan is that we would have conference superintendents starting up soon. I could be wrong. Okay, that'll be first question for Dr. Watson whenever he joins us. Number 1, a conference superintendent shall have the following responsibilities. A, collaborate with annual conference leaders to set a vision and build a clear and articulated missional strategy for the conference in keeping with the vision and mission of the Global Methodist Church. Seems pretty boilerplate. B, encourage, inspire, and motivate the clergy, laity, and churches of the annual conference to embrace and implement the vision and missional strategy of the annual conference. So any language that's suggesting that they're a primarily temporal role, I mean, this would be spiritual in nature. And you notice it's all positive, right? C, strengthen and multiply local churches, providing spiritual leadership to both laity and clergy. You know, I feel like some of this language is undoing the public image they've given of this, which is that the bishops are the main ones encouraging, educating, empowering, and that the conference superintendents are mostly just keeping order and reporting to the bishop what he or she needs to know. This is starting to, in my mind, support the critique from Jay Therrell. If you haven't seen that interview from last week, you need to watch it. He said essentially what the TLC plan is doing is creating bishops, conference superintendents, or for all intents and purposes, bishops, and then archbishops over them, which is much more of a Roman Catholic system. So this you know, that both roles have temporal and spiritual authority in explicit language, and that both are expected to operate in these ways indicates to me that there might be more legitimacy to Therrell's critique than I had originally made room for. D, provide general oversight for the fiscal program operations of the annual conference. Yeah, you gotta have somebody watching over the money other than the treasurer. E, ensure fair process for clergy and laity in administrative and judicial proceedings. Yeah, I guess that seems appropriate. Yeah, just got to make sure that the judicial process is being followed. F, form the districts or equivalent after consultation with the presiding elders and bishops. I thought decision-making authority for the formation of districts was with the annual conference ultimately, but this makes it sound like it's for the conference superintendent after consultation with presiding elders and bishops. Essentially, it doesn't say the word cabinet, but that's essentially what a cabinet is. G, recommend the presiding elders for appointment by the bishop. So yeah, it's the bishop. We covered this yesterday. The bishop makes the actual appointments, but he or she is expected to do so after consulting with the conference superintendents. G, recommend the presiding elders for appointment by the bishop. Very similar concept. H, convene together and supervise the cabinet of the annual conference. So yeah, you've got the chief connectional officer at the top who convenes and supervises the connectional committee. I forget. But then you've got that also on the annual conference level. You have these guys convening their chief governing body. I, in consultation with the presiding elders, present appointments in the annual conference to be fixed and approved by the bishop. How's that different from... Oh, okay, so before it was just presiding elders. Now it's all appointments. Sorry. J, divide or unite circuits, charges, stations, or missions as judged necessary and to recommend appropriate appointments. So it sounds to me like this position gets to just decide, this is a singular position deciding the makeup of circuits, charges, stations, or missions, as well as we had districts before. How am I missing this? Yeah, F, form the districts after consultation. Now we have dividing or uniting different circuits, charges, stations, or missions. I'm not sure these are all different things. It's just saying all these words can be used to describe cooperative units of local churches. And so that's not going to be under the presiding elder or the bishop. That's going to be the responsibility of the conference superintendent. K, transfer upon request of the receiving conference superintendent, clergy members of one annual conference to another, provided said member agrees to the said transfer, and to send to the secretaries of both conferences involved and to the conference boards of ministry timely written notices of the transfer of members. So he or she is the one responsible for overseeing the transfer of clergy to other conferences. And then the only limitation on that is they have to agree to get transferred. L, ensure that an appropriate personnel and supervisory record is kept and maintained on each clergy member as required. There shall be only one file maintained for each member containing both personnel and supervisory information. Clergy shall have access to the entirety of their file and shall have the right to add a response to any information contained therein. I love this. This is the sort of thing that, it's like I get so mad when I go to the doctor and they won't give me my own stinking medical records. So they're going to keep records. There's only going to be one. There's not going to be like one for the clergy and another for the conference. You're going to get to see whatever they have on file about you if you're clergy, and you're going to be able to file an answer to any concerns that they have about you. I think that's fantastic. M, chair the conference leadership team or equivalent as provided in the established rules of the conference. So that's going to be different from the cabinet. I'm not sure what the conference leadership team is responsible for, but they're going to chair it. And after consultation with the Board of Ministry chair and the presiding elders, the conference superintendent shall nominate clergy and laity to serve on the Board of Ministry. Okay, so the Board of Ministry is responsible for bringing clergy in, reviewing them, recommending them to the annual conference. The conference superintendent is going to be nominating people to serve on that board. Okay. O, nominate the Committee on Investigation and Committee on Administrative Review per the Judicial Practice and Procedure rules of the Global Methodist Church. That document, Judicial Practice and Procedure, is a document that operates alongside of the Book of Doctrines and Discipline, but is not contained in it. TJ and I started reviewing it, got bogged down, went other directions. But the Committee on Investigation and Committee on Administrative Review are two other committees. So there are 3 committees so far that the conference superintendent is responsible for making nominations for. P, represent the bishop in his or her absence as assigned. Seems fair. And Q, discharge such other duties as the Book of Doctrines and Discipline may direct. So that's that final catch-all category. And then closing out the petition, point 2, there may be a conference committee on superintendency elected to foster a healthy relationship between the conference and the conference superintendent. Each conference superintendent shall be evaluated annually in a process approved by the bishop. So it doesn't say how that conference committee on superintendency is going to be constituted, who's going to make nominations to it. It does not say that the conference superintendent is going to make those nominations, but it does say that they are going to have an annual evaluation process that is approved by the bishop over them. That sounds good. So with respect to petition 33, of course, this should only be approved if people are in favor of the TLC plan. And again, I'm not familiar yet with the Florida plan's understanding of conference superintendents over the next 2 years. We'll maybe get to that later, but in the meantime, what kind of leadership do we want at the top? What kind of responsibilities do we want them to have? Seems like the conference superintendent is going to have a good deal of authority that is somewhat unchecked, but it's hard to check all authority. So I just think, I don't immediately say anything that discounts this as a valid way to structure the church. It just needs to be kept in mind that we might want a synthesis of the different plans, or who knows. But I don't see anything. Did I see anything that really concerned me here? I don't think so. So I think the Episcopacy Committee is probably going to take most of these features and put them on some kind of office for the next 2 years at least, but we'll see. All right, what's going to happen now is I need to bring Dr. Watson on board, and there's just some awkward stuff involved in that, so I'm just going to send you to a screen real quick to chill out while I don't know, let's just go through the awkward process together. So I'm going to admit him. I can change my mind. And then there's Dr. Watson. I'm going to bring you on. Add camera. And then guest one. Let's see how you look, friend. Let's see. Okay. Good morning. Can you hear me? Are you doing all right?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
Oh, you look good and you sound good. I'm very pleased. Okay. And then
Great.
I'm going to have this screen, and I think I should be able to bring you on. Yep, it works out just fine. And if you can't read that, I'll read things out loud. But we just got done with paragraph 33, and this outlines the conference superintendent role. And I'm not clear. Well, what was the very first question I said I was going to ask you? I said, here's the first question that I need to ask, and now I'm forgetting it. So let me go to my comments and see what people have said. Maybe somebody's going to juke my memory. Oh, and I don't have the comments on this screen. So give me 1 second because I need to hit copy and paste. Chat. And then there we go. Hopefully it'll show up now. It does. Okay. Ymir J11 just thanking us for doing this work. Jeremy Smith says, keep up the good work. Very good. Marianne, good to see you, sister. All right. Let's start with a couple questions I had from yesterday. You might be able to answer them for me. For those just joining in, Reverend Dr. Watson has been serving on the Transitional Leadership Committee, which is the head governance body of the GMC so far in this transitional period. He also serves on the Episcopacy Legislative Committee for the Convening Conference. So he's been a part of all these conversations. So within the TLC system that's being promoted, there is an Episcopacy Committee that operates throughout the year that is responsible for overseeing the bishops. We went over some legislation yesterday that indicated to me that that this committee would be including the voices and votes of bishops. Did I understand that correctly?
Okay. Hi, Jeffrey. Good morning, and thanks for having me on your live stream.
Oh, yeah.
I want to clarify. I'm not here representing the TLC or the Episcopacy Committee. I'm just a guy.
Oh, you're just a guy.
Uh,
Okay.
has a vested interest in I'm a delegate to the General Conference, and so I have a real interest in the outcome of this. But in terms of my being here, I'm not speaking on anyone's behalf except my own behalf.
Of course.
With regard to the Episcopacy Committee, what is your question again?
Does it include the voices and votes of active bishops in their delegation, or are they a separate committee that consults the bishops but does not give them a vote in what they do?
Are you talking about if we were to adopt one of the proposals
The TLC
on the
proposal.
table?
Yeah.
the TLC
Yeah.
proposal.
Yeah.
My recollection is that the Episcopacy Committee doesn't in involve bishops. There's an assembly of bishops, and that's a separate body. The Episcopacy Committee itself, I think, is something entirely separate from that.
Yeah.
And it would need to be because in some sense it provides accountability for bishops.
So the reason I called, okay, so I'll show my screen now, and it just confused me. So help me make sense out of this, because
Sure.
as has been
I'll
established.
try.
So this is in Petition 31, and it's on the General Committee on Episcopacy. And then it says, while those elected shall begin their term 60 days following the close of the general conference at which they are elected, those selected may participate with voice, not vote, in any session. I'm just now understanding it. This is not talking about bishops. This is talking about members of the Episcopacy Committee.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm an idiot. I was so confused about this yesterday. I think what confused me is like whenever a bishop is elected, they also have a 60-day period before they become an active bishop. For some reason, I was just conflating this, but this is not talking about bishops at all. This is talking about members of the committee.
Well, I think it's easy to get confused with this stuff because there's you read through this material, you start to go bug-eyed. There's so many details
Yes, I have
involved,
gone
and
bug-eyed. You're
especially
right.
in the starting of a new denomination. It's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah. Well, thanks for being gracious with me. Man, sometimes you just need to come at something with new eyes the day afterwards, and it kind of lines out. So you're okay. So let me be clear. You're only representing yourself. You're not representing collectively these groups. They have not sent you. You are the ambassador for the TLC to Jeffrey's audience or anything, but you are able to represent yourself as one who's been a part of these conversations, understands the vision, understands the priorities of the committees that you sit on. So that's why you're here with me, and because I like you and I like talking to you. So with Petition 33, you reviewed this before we talked today. Were there any things with respect to conference superintendents that you thought were important for people to understand?
Well, I think that the one of the crucial matters that we have to understand is that there will only be conference superintendents under one of the two episcopacy proposals. So the TLC proposal envisions a rather significant distinction between local superintendency and general superintendency. And the bishops are general superintendents, and the conference superintendents provide localized oversight. And part of the reason that we did that is because we wanted to guard against regionalization. I think we've seen the bitter fruit of regionalization in our former denomination. And so what we are trying to do is get away from that.
Uh-huh.
I think the Florida plan, if that's what we want to call it, envisions getting rid of conference superintendents and collapsing their work into the office of the bishop. And so the bishop would have far more temporal responsibility than in the TLC plan.
Right.
I personally don't think that's a good idea. One of the criticisms of the TLC plan has been that bishops don't have any temporal responsibility, but that's not true either. They just have less temporal responsibility and more spiritual oversight.
Yeah, that
These
was
would be
my concern as I went through this. I couldn't figure out. So, in the language with bishops and with conference superintendents in the TLC plan, the language of spiritual and temporal is used in both cases. So, even though the public language about these things has been the bishop is more spiritual, the conference superintendent is more temporal, I don't see that reflected in the actual language of the TLC plan so far. But is this just
no,
something? Go ahead.
I don't think that's an accurate read. You know, what the idea that bishops in the TLC plan don't have any temporal leadership responsibilities isn't accurate.
Of course.
Although I've read that a couple of places. I also just really feel strongly In full disclosure, I helped to draft the TLC plan, and so you can tell where my biases are. But I feel strongly that the denomination must have um, spiritual guidance and leadership and oversight. Um, we need theological revival, not just a revival of people in churches, not just church planting, but the set of ideas that we teach in our churches, the set of claims we make as Christians really matters. And we need people who can help, whose job it is
Mhm.
to guide the church through difficult matters of spiritual discernment. And so I would suggest that, I mean, think about the things that we're wrestling with as Christians right now. What things like the use of AI,
Mhm.
things like um, IVF.
In vitro
Okay,
fertilization,
in
creating a
vitro,
life that then is put in dialogue with other lives. Only one is picked; the rest are either frozen or thrown out. Is that a problem? Yeah, we need
and
spiritual
and
authority to speak
and,
on that.
and these are extremely complex issues. And so, if we don't have the necessary theological vision and guidance on these things, I fear what will happen is that we'll lapse into pragmatism,
Right.
and that tends to be bad for the church, in my opinion.
Well, and of
So,
course, Thurl would say about his program that bishops in his plan are also expected to issue teaching documents, but they wouldn't necessarily carry the same weight of the whole denomination. Where some of the explicit language from the TLC plan is that the Assembly of Bishops will collectively put out teaching documents that establish some of the theological foundations of the GMC and speak with a
yeah.
louder, broader voice, and that's what you're speaking to here, right?
Yeah, and I don't in any way want to misrepresent the Florida plan. I think
Of course. Yeah.
it was created in good faith and it needs reasonable consideration, and perhaps that's what the church will end up with. And if that's what the church ends up with, as an elder of the church, I will abide by the discipline of the church.
Of course. Yeah,
But
we're this is
but
a conversation among friends, really about better, best, perfect. So we're there. Daryl's conversation with me was very much in that tenor, and that's how I'm hearing you as well. So anyone who's trying to make this more dramatic than that is just doing trying to attack a windmill. It's just not real. So I thought so. You've established kind of theologically the broader picture of why it is that you're a fan of the TLC plan. It it does not as easily facilitate regional factioning, breaking up along regional lines because you have these bishops that travel between conferences and then conference with each other and seek to be all of one mind. And then also that they're able to more dynamically and powerfully engage the culture in which we are and speak to the different issues that impact us. And I think those are both very worthy goals to establish. So I had you and me spending a little less than an hour left going through some of the petitions, figuring out the meaning of some of the nitty gritty, and then how it fits into the larger picture that you've established here. Would it be all right if we just started looking at paragraph 34 and then I can read through it and you can interrupt me with insights that you think are important for people to see? Okay.
sounds good.
Okay. So here's my screen. This is paragraph 34, petition 34, excuse me, selection and assignment of presiding elders. So we just read about conference superintendents. Now presiding elders are the primary, they're like district superintendents in the UMC. The rationale here is that the existing position of presiding elder is addressed within the new expression of the superintendency. This is not in section 2, 7, what would that be, 8? It's not in section 8 anymore. Well, no, it would, anyway, it's in some section, the office of presiding elders. And so this is paragraph 508, no longer 506, selection assignment of presiding elders. So an elder, it marks out presiding elders are elders. It just starts an elder in full connection may be appointed to lead a district or its equivalent, we're not getting clear on terminology yet, by the bishop as a presiding elder upon recommendation by the conference superintendent. A presiding elder is appointed annually after evaluation for effectiveness. Oh, so hypothetically, we could be changing presiding elders every year. That would be weird. A presiding elder may not serve more than 12 years in the aggregate unless the delegates to the district conference to which he or she is to be appointed affirm such an appointment by majority vote of the delegates present who cast ballots. So they are appointed every year, but they can get appointed up to 12 years, and then they have to get off unless everybody in their district, or whatever you want to call it, affirm appointment by majority vote, more than 50%. Okay, that's interesting. So then it eliminated this language to the cabinet as an extension of the superintending role of the bishop within the annual conference. They serve at the bishop's pleasure and for a specific term of years to be determined by the convening conference. In instances where a new provisional annual conference is formed, the bishop shall consult with clergy and lay leaders of the provisional conference for the purpose of selecting presiding elders. So what I understand this to be doing so far is removing the bishop from direct oversight of the presiding elders. They are now overseen by the conference superintendent, who runs this by the bishop. That was established in the previous petition, but even so, they report to the presiding elder and not the bishop. Is there anything else pertaining to point 1 that I failed to pick up on, David?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
I mean, the presiding elder is just a more specific means of it's a more specific office charged with local superintendency.
Local super. So yeah,
So
the
so we
conference
have various
superintendent,
levels
then
of
local superintendency.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But then the appointment system, that's interesting. I hadn't paid attention to how they get appointed. It's just directly by the presiding elder. And then the only point at which the vote of the district comes in is if they've been in that position longer than 12 years and want to stay in that position. That's interesting. Okay. Point 2.
Yeah, and I
Go ahead.
one thing I want to say is I wouldn't see the presiding elder in most cases changing every year. Presumably that could be the case, but you probably wouldn't want to do that. You would probably want more continuity. But if you did have a presiding elder who was problematic for some reason, it's good to have the capacity to remove him or her after just 1 year.
Yeah, now that you say it that way, I like that. You know, yeah, Methodists do want more continuity than we have had, but then you also don't want someone dysfunctional in a position for a prolonged period of time. So that makes sense. Okay. They marked out point 2, so maybe it's still point 1. In the selection of presiding elders, bishops, and conference superintendents shall give due consideration to the inclusiveness of the GMC. So this is just kind of a race statement, I think. Just we got to have diversity. It's like a diversity commitment. We're not going to only put white guys in this position. I think that's all it's really saying, right?
I would think it would apply to women as well, that we want both men and women on our committees.
Oh, sure, yeah. Sex and race in consideration of for these positions, we're going to make sure that we don't have just white men, but we'll have people of color and women. Yeah, okay. Okay, so petition 34, of course, Dr. Watson believes that we should approve this. And if we go with the conference superintendency plan, then or the TLC's plan, then of course this is an important part of it. So it wouldn't make sense to not approve it. Anything else to say about this petition before we go on? All right. Well, let's see what petition 35 holds. And here it is. This is the responsibilities of presiding elders. So we've just figured out how they get put in place. Now, what are they supposed to do? We have 3 pages of this. The rationale is the existing position of presiding elder is addressed within the new expression of the superintendency. This is now paragraph 509. And it begins, as an extension of the office of bishop and conference superintendent, the presiding elder shall oversee the ministry of the clergy. It removes total because I don't know why. Oversee the ministry of the clergy and churches in the communities of the district to which they are appointed. The presiding elder Well, it marked out in their missions of witness and service in the world. I guess they just thought that was unnecessary. The presiding elder is the acting administrator of any pastoral charge in which a pastoral vacancy may develop. Okay, so if a pastor backs out of, or gets fired, or has a health issue and has to back out, or gets fed up and leaves, then the presiding elder is the one who just de facto is in charge of that church. Or where no pastor is appointed. The presiding elder has the following specific responsibilities. 1, offer support, care, and counsel to churches and clergy concerning matters affecting their ministry. I've got presiding elder doing that for me right now, and I appreciate that. 2, together with the bishop, guard, transmit, and proclaim the apostolic faith as it is expressed in Scripture and tradition from a Wesleyan perspective, communicating and defending the doctrines and discipline of the church as provided for in the Book of Doctrines and Discipline. I'm noticing that the language is going back and forth between bishop and presiding elder. Sometimes it's just the presiding elder that they report to. Sometimes it's the bishop and the presiding elder. This time it's just with the bishop. Anything to note about that, David?
I don't think so. I can't remember
You
if
want
I
me to
was
read it to
involved
you again?
in the writing of that. I don't think I was. But it seems like there would be different areas of accountability where you would probably need to bring the bishop in.
Sure.
But I don't really have any further comment on those.
Yeah. Yeah, the only concern I have is, I don't know if you've ever had a situation, David, where you have multiple supervisors, but it can get kind of stressful and dysfunctional. So
Yeah,
anyway,
I've
I'm
been
sure
there.
yeah, have you? I once had a
Yeah.
job where I had 5 bosses overseeing me. It was the most, I had to get out of there. It was awful.
Yeah. Yeah.
2 might be reasonable. All right, this is number 3. Be the district's chief missional strategist, providing missional accountability, collaborating with congregations and communities with the district to assess and understand their context and develop their leadership needs. So, and then it removes all of this language of the district and be committed to living out the values of the church, including a mandate of inclusiveness, model, teach, and promote generous Christian living, cooperate in developing Christian unity, and ecumenical, multicultural, multiracial, and cooperative ministries, and work with persons across the church to develop programs of ministry and mission that extend the witness of Christ into the world. Now, to remove all that is not to say that we don't care about those things, or the TLC doesn't care about those things. It's just to say there's plenty of other language in just basic elders having those values and the general church structure having those values. There's no need to reiterate all of those things all the time. That just takes up tons of space in the book. Do you agree that that's why that would be taken out?
Probably. I mean, we don't want a gigantic book of discipline. We want a sufficient book of discipline.
Right.
And if we stated something in one place, we probably don't need to restate it in other places unless there's some compelling reason to do so.
Right.
So we should try to keep the doctrines and disciplines of the church at a manageable size.
Yes.
And that would include eliminating redundancies in the text.
100%. I love it. All right. And then with the part that was added, it's just common sense. They need to be a coordinating entity in their district or whatever they're going to call it. All right. Now we have point 3. Be the district's chief missional strategist, providing missional accountability, collaborating with congregations and communities within the district to assess and understand their context. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you, poor guy. Oh, no, they just moved this language down to point 3 is what happened. See, sometimes there's virtue in just continuing to read. Where was context? And develop the leadership needs of the district and be committed to living out the values of the church, including a mandate of inclusiveness, model, teach, and promote generous Christian giving, cooperate in developing Christian unity and ecumenical. Okay, it's the exact same language. So they just moved it down to a different point. So they decided it was important. They just wanted to format it correctly. Okay. And then they marked out point 4, and I don't see this language down below, along with the bishop, guard, transmit. Oh, they just changed the order, it seems, right? together
I
with the
think that's
bishop.
right.
Point 2. Yeah. That's interesting. Is that the exact same language? It is. Okay. They just changed the order. That's interesting. Okay. 4, collaborate with the bishop, conference superintendent, and cabinet in the process of appointing and assigning clergy and qualified lay ministers. Okay. The bishop and conference superintendent. The bishop ultimately is the one who makes appointments, but the conference superintendent is the primary person really organizing that and recommending that to the bishop. Point 5, develop an effective system for recruitment of candidates for ordained ministry. Oh, so there's not going to be a uniform system across the whole denomination?
I think that the system will be largely uniform. There could be some local variation, but I don't think there will be wild differences between annual conferences.
Okay. But if there are to be any district differences, then this is the guy or gal that'll be responsible for it. Okay. 6, establish working relationships with and lay leadership. No, and lay leader. They mark out pastor parish relations committees, clergy, district lay leaders, and other leadership, and all that established working relationships with and lay leader to develop faithful and effective systems of ministry within the district. So wait, do I understand that there are these bodies, they don't have to consult with pastor parish relations committees, clergy, or district lay leaders anymore? They only need to talk to the lay leader in the consultation process?
Well, except for clergy, these are laity. And I think that that's already assumed that they will be consulting with the pastor, as the congregation will be consulting with the pastor in the making of appointments.
So it's
Because it
assumed they
is a
already
more,
have a relationship with the clergy, but then it's making it explicit they need to also intentionally establish a relationship with the lay leader?
I think the intention here is to demonstrate that, or to specify, I should say, stipulate that the congregation does have more say. The process is more consultative than it was in our previous denomination, and it's not simply you get someone appointed, but and I'm not saying that that was normally the case in the UMC either. I think it's just making clear that the congregation does have an important consultative role in this.
Okay, so the purpose of that is just to establish it's not just the presiding elder talking with the clergy, but also with laity and the local charge. Okay, okay.
Right,
That
right,
was not
right.
self-evident to me. Okay, thank you for that.
Sure.
Points 7 and 8 are eliminated. Serve as an example of spiritual leadership by living a balanced and faithful life and by encouraging both laity and clergy to continue to grow in spiritual formation. We'll see if that's added later, but I assume it was taken out because that's self-evident and doesn't need to be spelled out. Point 8, which was also deleted, offer support, care, and counsel to clergy concerning matters affecting their effective ministry. That's a fun sentence. So there's already been language of supporting and caring for clergy, so I assume that's why it was taken out. So the new point 7 is encourage covenant groups, not the building of, but just the covenant groups that are there, class meetings and band meetings. Okay, that's added in. Covenant groups, class meetings, and band meetings, and eliminates and communities among both the clergy, and it deletes and clergy families, and the laity of, not on, of the district. This is such interesting editing to me. And the laity of the district. So encourage already established covenant groups. Yeah, not the building of. What? Speak to this a little bit. Do you know what this one was? Why they made this change?
I don't know.
Okay, it seems kind of persnickety, but I mean, that's one of the main things I care about is class meetings. I kind of like the original language where their job is to encourage the building of these groups, not just the encouraging of these already established groups. I hope your legislative committee goes back to the original version. And why they would not care about clergy families anymore is, well, that's not necessarily the right phrasing, but why that the clergy families would be taken out of that concern is strange to me. 8, maintain regular contact with clergy for counsel and supervision and receive written or electronic evaluations, which include each appointed clergy or assigned layperson's continuing education, spiritual practices, current ministry work, and goals for future ministry. So yeah, this goes to your point where before it was just establishing they need to make laity connections. This later on is establishing the clergy connections and doing what we would hope that they would do. So point 9, maintain the appropriate records of all clergy, no, not clergy, of all persons appointed to the charges. So we are allowing laity to serve at the head of local churches more than we originally envisioned. So they're going to be responsible for overseeing not just clergy, but laity and leadership, including clergy and extension ministries. And then it eliminates on the district, including clergy and extension ministry and ministry beyond the local church, as well as records dealing with property, endowments, and other tangible assets. Okay, so they're no longer responsible for maintaining records pertaining to property endowments. Is that now going, well, I don't remember that being in the conference superintendent role either. So are we just kind of getting away from the conference maintaining those records in any capacity?
No, I don't think so. But remember that there's no trust clause in the Global Methodist Church. And so the conference, some of these things are not things that the conference needs to keep record of.
Okay.
And so that they're not the conference's responsibility at a certain point. The local church owns its property. And so that could be part of the rationale for why this was removed.
That's interesting. Okay. Point 10, maintain appropriate records dealing with property endowments and other tangible assets of the district. Man, how many times am I going to do this before I learn my lesson? Okay, so they just made that a separate item because it really is kind of a separate thing. So they are going to keep those records, but the import of that is not going to be the same because there is no trust clause. I think that was a helpful thing to say. Thank you. Point 11, in consultation with the bishop and cabinet, work to develop the best strategic deployment of clergy possible in the district, including realignment of pastoral charges, larger parishes, cooperative parishes, multiple staff configurations, new church starts, and ecumenical shared ministries. Yeah, they changed some of the language, but it's still pretty comprehensive, so I don't imagine that being a big issue. 12, assume other leadership responsibilities as determined by the conference superintendent and or bishop. Okay. Other leadership responsibilities, and then it removes interpret and decide all questions of church law and discipline raised by the churches in the district. So who's responsible for that now? Would that be, well, I don't remember that being in the conference superintendent role either. So, and there is no more that could explain it down below. Do you know what that's about?
Probably it might, I'm not positive, but I would think that would, if you have issues of church law, those really need to go to the bishop. I'm sure that presiding elders would do a good job of interpreting church law, but the bishop is really where the rubber meets the road. So perhaps that's the rationale behind that.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I don't remember if that was in the bishop's job description section yesterday. And then the final remover was serve at the pleasure of the bishop and assume other leadership responsibilities as the bishop determines. So we already had those other leadership responsibilities, but this gets added on to 12 for the, well, no, this just carries through for the health and effectiveness of local churches in the district or annual conference. Okay. So I'd hoped we'd make it through one more petition, but we're not going to have time for that. What we're going to do now is we're going to switch over to locals, and there are so many comments for us to go through. Doug, I hope my sound levels got figured out. Let's do one question, and then we're going to transition over to locals. Yeah, Tim was glad that I corrected my confusion earlier, and then Clayton is very happy to have you on today. D thanks you for helping us understand our polity. Thank you, Dr. Watson. And then D says, I'm starting to like the idea of the TLC plan for bishops, but I'm interested in hearing more details about how any bishop or annual conference organization plan affects how the annual conference interacts with the local church. So perhaps you could give kind of a 2 minute, 1 to 2 minute, how do you think each of the plans, the Florida plan, TLC plan, are they going to impact the local church differently? And if so, what are some basic things that you foresee?
I mean, I think there'll be some differences.
Oh, and
Of
D said an
course,
example. I'm sorry, brother. One example would be more details about how clergy appointments are made. So that's something where she would like to know if there's a difference between those things. But keep going with what direction you were going. But
I, I don't think on on a very practical level, something like appointments is going to be vastly different in the two plans. In the TLC plan, it will be primarily the conference superintendent who is setting up the appointments and the presiding elders, and then the bishop sets appointments. But in the Florida plan, um, you don't have presiding, or excuse me, you don't have conference superintendents, and so the bishop is involved more in sort of the nitty gritty of appointment making. But that probably won't affect local churches a great deal. I think the major difference between the two plans is the extent to which we want to have and emphasize general superintendency. And the TLC plan is set up with a very strong notion of general superintendency. And again, a major reason for that is to avoid the kinds of problems that we faced when governance became unofficially localized within the United Methodist Church. One of the things that always plagues me as I think about the work that we're doing is what will be the law of unintended consequences. What will be the unintended consequences of our actions?
uh-huh.
I doubt in 1968, when the United Methodist Church was established, very many people realized the effect that jurisdictionalism would have on the governance of the church. And
Let me summarize for the audience real quick because you've written about this, but the way that the United Methodist Church separated jurisdictions allowed for the lawlessness of the Western jurisdiction to compromise the whole body without correction from the body. So what I understand you to be saying, Dr. Watson, is that when they established that section, that jurisdictional order, they really didn't anticipate the negative impacts that it could have. So this law of unintended consequences had huge import in that context. So go on.
yeah, and I would say it wasn't just Western jurisdiction. It was that a lot of people realized that there was no real way to enforce accountability in a system where the Episcopal accountability was localized. So that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about all the time. What are the unintended consequences of what we're going to do here? We don't want to be too heavy-handed with superintendency. We don't want to be too light with superintendency. We want to strike just the right balance of superintendency. We don't want to have too big a bureaucracy, but we also don't want to have too small a bureaucracy. You sort of have to have the denominational infrastructure necessary to accomplish the ministry goals you want to accomplish. And so these are the kinds of questions I'm always thinking about, and I know a lot of other people are thinking about them as well.
Yeah.
And we just have to do the best we can and give ourselves some grace and make changes as we need to as we move forward.
Yeah, I've heard it referred to as the Goldilocks principle. You can't be too hot or too cold. You got to figure out that place in the middle where you got to be. So it
Right.
sounds like wisdom
Right.
to me. Well, I got David to commit to just a little bit longer. So what's going to happen now is I want to ask him some questions dealing with how the legislative committees are working so far and what he's perceived about the Episcopacy Legislative Committee. And then there are additional questions that have been lifted up, and we'll take more on locals. So we're going to transition over to locals now. And if you want to be a part of that conversation or watch it later, then you're going to want to go over to plainspoken.locals.com. So we're just going to have a quick transition. and then we'll be up on locals. If you're already at locals, just stay there. We'll come right back.